Imagine you're just, checking your mailbox one day, and you find this incredibly generous letter.
Okay, I'm listening.
Yeah, and it promises you, like, perfect health, a beautiful, totally secure home, and a future just entirely free from pain.
I mean, I'd be thrilled,
Right,
obviously.
you'd be absolutely thrilled. But then you look a little closer at the envelope,
Mm.
and you realize the letter is actually addressed to this specific neighbor who lived roughly 2,500 years ago.
Oh, well, that's a bit of a letdown.
Yeah, it's an objectively beautiful letter, but you realize pretty quickly it was never actually written to you.
Which completely changes how you read it, right?
Exactly.
It goes from being this, like, personal guarantee to just a historical artifact. You can appreciate it, sure, but you certainly wouldn't start packing your bags and, you know, planning your move based on it.
Right. And today on the deep dive, we are exploring what happens when religious study materials basically hand you that exact letter and tell you to start packing your bags.
It's a really fascinating dynamic to look at.
It really is.
Mm.
So we are looking at a very specific piece of literature today. It's the Jehovah's Witnesses study brochure called Enjoy Life Forever, or Glücklich für immer in the original German context we're looking at.
Specifically, we're focusing on Lesson 2, which is titled The Bible Gives Hope.
Yeah, and our guide for this analysis is this really interesting German YouTube channel called Hilfe Zeugen Jehovah's, which just translates to Help for Jehovah's Witnesses.
And we really need to establish an important piece of context right up front here.
Oh, absolutely.
The creators of this video, they are Christians, but they have actually never been Jehovah's Witnesses themselves.
Which I think gives them this really unique outside vantage point.
Totally.
Like, they aren't looking at this brochure through the lens of any sort of organizational loyalty. They are looking at it purely through the lens of the biblical text itself.
Right. And so our mission today is to look at exactly how this specific study material handles the Bible's promises.
And what happens when you actually look at the cited verses in their original historical context?
Exactly. Because, you know, if you are listening to this and you have a background as a Jehovah's Witness, or maybe you're currently studying with a publisher.
A publisher being, what the organization calls its active members who preach.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So maybe you're studying with the publisher and you've started going to meetings at the local Kingdom Hall. Hearing this kind of outside analysis might feel, well, a bit disorienting.
Oh, I'm sure it would. When you are genuinely seeking, like, the truth, it can be really tough to step back and critique the material you're being handed.
It's incredibly difficult. But our tone today is just about objective, respectful text analysis.
Exactly. We want to validate that disorienting feeling for sure, but also encourage you to really look at the mechanics of what you're actually reading.
Because the source video points out this massive structural issue right out of the gate.
Yeah, let's get into that. It starts with how the brochure uses Jeremiah 29.10.
Right, so the brochure quotes this verse to the student. It says, "For I well know the thoughts that I am thinking toward you, thoughts of peace and not of calamity, to give you a future and a hope."
Which is, it's a gorgeous verse.
It's one of the most famous, comforting verses in the entire Bible. And they present this as a direct promise to the reader.
But here is the problem the source highlights. If you simply back up just one single verse and read Jeremiah 29.7, the entire framework sort of collapses.
It really does. Did you pull up the chapter?
I did. I actually pulled up the chapter before we sat down to record, and wow, the shift is jarring.
Read it for us.
Okay, so verse 10 literally says, "When 70 years have been fulfilled for Babylon, I will turn my attention to you, and I will make good my promise by bringing you back to this place."
Notice what it says there.
Yeah, it explicitly names Babylon and a 70-year timeline.
Right. It is historically locked. God isn't speaking to like a 21st century person sitting in their living room reading a brochure.
He is speaking directly to the ancient nation of Israel.
During the Babylonian exile, they had been taken captive, they were displaced, and this was a highly specific, geographic, and time-bound promise of restoration for them.
Oh, wait, I want to push back on this just a little bit.
Sure, go for it.
Isn't applying ancient texts to modern life like exactly what all religions do? Why is this specific use in the brochure so problematic? People pull inspiration from ancient texts all the time.
Well, that's a really great distinction to make. Drawing principles from an ancient text, like saying, God cares for his people in hard times, that is totally standard religious practice.
Right. That makes sense.
But that is not what the source argues this brochure is doing. The brochure is taking a literal specific guarantee made to an ancient nation and engaging in what scholars call eisegesis.
Eisegesis, meaning reading your own ideas into the text.
Exactly, reading into the text instead of drawing out from it. It essentially trains the student to believe that these specific historical guarantees apply directly to them surviving the current system of things.
Ah, okay, the system of things. Let's define that. For anyone unfamiliar, that's the Jehovah's Witness terminology for the current wicked world that they believe is basically about to be destroyed.
Right. So the brochure is essentially saying, look at this promise to the ancient Israelites. That means you personally are guaranteed to survive Armageddon and step into a perfect future as long as you stick with us.
Wow. So it literally borrows the historical mail to manufacture a modern contract.
Precisely. It collapses thousands of years of context to make the student feel personally addressed by a divine guarantee. A guarantee that the surrounding text just doesn't actually support.
So, okay, if the brochure takes liberties with the who of the promise, like applying ancient mail to modern readers, how does it handle the what?
What do you mean?
Well, Lesson 2 relies heavily on the book of Revelation to describe what this promised future actually looks like, the earthly paradise.
Ah, yes. And this is where the source's analysis gets incredibly profound, I think.
Yeah, it blew my mind a little bit.
The brochure leans heavily on Revelation 21.4. This is the famous verse about a future where God will wipe out every tear and death, mourning, and pain will be no more.
Right, it's the ultimate vision of this restored earthly paradise. You know, you see the illustrations of people petting pandas, building perfect houses, having perfect health.
It's a very compelling image.
It is, but the source video points out something totally glaring that is absent from this picture. I was looking at their breakdown of the brochure's illustrations and the text, and it hit me, God is missing.
It sounds contradictory, doesn't it?
Totally. How can the creator be missing from a paradise promised by the creator?
Well, the source creator makes this piercing observation. Just like with Jeremiah, you have to read the context.
Right, backing up a few verses again.
Exactly. If you read Revelation 21, verses 1 through 3, the focus isn't on the real estate or the perfect health at all. The absolute climax is in verse 3.
Which says, look, the tent of God is with mankind, and he will reside with them.
Yes, the unmediated presence of the divine. The source makes a really critical theological distinction here about how the enjoy life forever material operates.
How so?
Well, it focuses almost entirely on inner-worldly things.
Like the lack of sickness, the abundance of food, all the ideal physical conditions.
Exactly. But it functionally ignores the ultimate biblical hope, which, according to the text, is reconciliation and intimate communion with God.
So it's focusing purely on the gifts while kind of marginalizing the giver.
That's a perfect way to put it.
It's kind of like being invited to this incredible wedding reception and you're only excited about the open bar and the catering while completely ignoring the bride and groom.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Like you get this perfect environment, but the person who made it possible isn't really the focus at all.
I would actually take that metaphor a step further, based on what the source argues about JW theology.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's not just that you, the guest, are ignoring the bride and groom. It's that you are explicitly told you aren't allowed at the head table with them. You were instructed to basically stay out on the lawn.
Wait, wow. Okay, explain the mechanics of that, because that ties directly into how Jehovah's Witnesses view the afterlife, right?
Exactly. The source notes how this study material implicitly reinforces a very specific organizational doctrine. Jehovah's Witnesses are taught a sort of two-tier class system regarding salvation.
Right, the 144,000.
Yes, only a small elite group of 144,000, often referred to as the Spirit-anointed, which includes their leadership, the governing body, only they actually go to heaven to be in the direct presence of God.
And what about the millions of other members, the standard publishers?
They are taught their hope is exclusively earthly. The source explicitly states that the student studying this brochure is essentially sworn into this earthly paradise.
Which immediately leads them to assume the heavenly hope is closed off to them.
Right. The intimate presence of God described in Revelation 21.3, that's not for them.
That is just a devastating reframing of the text. I mean, if you read Revelation 21, the entire point is that the separation between God and humanity is finally over.
Yes, the tent of God is with mankind.
But the brochure takes this cosmic, God-centered promise of unity and edits it down to a material, earthbound focus where God remains distant in heaven.
And you just get the nice house and the good health.
Yeah.
And, for a Christian, which the creators of our source video are, a new world without the continuous, direct presence of God just isn't a paradise at all.
Because the perfect physical conditions are supposed to be a byproduct.
Exactly, a side effect of God dwelling with mankind. When the study material separates the two, it fundamentally alters the biblical hope.
Okay, so, recapping here. The brochure takes Jeremiah out of context, and it arguably strips the core theological meaning out of Revelation.
Yes.
Yet it heavily insists that the student should just fully trust its interpretations. In fact, it brings in a famous biblical example to prove why you should trust them. It cites the Beroeans from Acts chapter 17.
Oh man, this might be the most ironic part of the entire brochure.
It's wild.
And the source creator dissects it beautifully.
Yeah, so for context, the brochure uses the Beroeans to essentially say, look at these ancient people, they received the message eagerly, you should trust our message, just like they trusted the Apostle Paul.
Right.
But, I mean, I remember reading about the Beroeans. Weren't they famous precisely because they didn't just blindly trust what they were told?
That is the absolute crux of the issue. The book of Acts calls the Beroeans more noble-minded, not just because they listened eagerly, but because they carefully examined the scriptures daily to see whether these things were so.
Right.
I mean, they were listening to the Apostle Paul, arguably the highest human authority in the early church.
And they still treated his words as secondary to the written text.
They fact-checked Paul.
They fact-checked Paul. That's amazing.
The Bible was their benchmark. And what the source video is pointing out is that the Enjoy Life Forever brochure uses the Beroeans to encourage trust while simultaneously discouraging the actual Beroean behavior.
Because if a student actually acted like a Beroean...
Exactly. If they acted like a Beroean, they would read Jeremiah 29.3, and they would read Revelation 21.13, and they would see the discrepancies for themselves.
The source is basically issuing a challenge then. Be an actual Beroean. Don't just accept the brochure because it's handed to you by someone friendly at the Kingdom Hall or because it has really high production value. Check the surrounding verses.
Check the text, yeah.
And I think that brings us to the actual mechanics of how this brochure gets people to bypass their critical thinking. Because it's not just presenting dry text, right? It uses some pretty intense psychological tactics.
It really does. And understanding the cognitive mechanisms behind these tactics is crucial.
Break that down for us.
Well, the source highlights a specific reflection question the brochure asks the student. It asks, how do these verses touch you? Do they give you courage? Do you know someone in your family or circle of friends who would also be encouraged by them?
See, when I first read that, it sounded so innocent, just like a nice, thoughtful journal prompt.
Right, it totally masks itself as a harmless reflection question.
Yeah.
But functionally, it's a highly effective recruitment funnel.
How does that work in the brain? Why is that so effective?
First off, it demands emotional internalization. The brochure actually tells you to dream yourself into this perfect, pain-free future. You know, you visualize living without grief or illness.
Okay, yeah.
Once you invest emotionally in that vivid picture, your cognitive defense is just naturally lower. And then the very next sentence monetizes that emotional investment by asking, well, who else needs to hear this?
Oh, wow. Right. It leverages human empathy. Because if you think you found the cure for cancer, you don't keep it to yourself. You tell your family immediately.
Exactly. So before the student has even fully grasped or fact-checked the doctrine, before they've been a Beroean, they are being subconsciously drafted as a recruiter.
It bypasses the analytical evaluation of the text entirely and goes straight to social obligation.
It's incredibly subtle but very powerful.
Yeah.
And the source points out that this psychological manipulation isn't just in the text, it's in the multimedia as well.
Oh, right, the video.
Yes. They specifically bring up a video linked in the study material titled, How Beautiful It Will Be.
This part of the analysis honestly blew my mind. The source creator challenges the viewer to watch that video and look really closely at the stylistic editing devices. Specifically, there's a very deliberate shift from black and white footage to vibrant color.
It's a classic, incredibly powerful cinematic trick.
It is. And from a neuroscience perspective, it is almost unfair to the viewer.
How so?
Well, when you watch black and white footage of poverty, sickness, or war, it literally stresses the brain. It represents the current system of things as entirely bleak.
Right. It creates tension.
But when the video suddenly bursts into vibrant, high-definition color to show the organization's specific vision of an earthly paradise, it triggers a massive release of dopamine. It physically simulates relief in the brain.
That is exactly what is happening. The shift in color totally bypasses your prefrontal cortex.
The logical part.
Right. The logical Beroean part of your brain that analyzes scripture. and it hits your limbic system, your emotional center, with an absolute sledgehammer.
Wow.
You are no longer debating theology at that point. Your brain is just physically associating the Jehovah's Witness organization with a physiological feeling of relief.
It's an onboarding process disguised as Bible study.
Yep.
It cements a theological doctrine using visual relief rather than actual scriptural accuracy.
Which is exactly why the source creator's warning is so necessary here. They make it very clear that they believe the Bible does offer real hope.
Yeah, they aren't trying to destroy the student's faith at all.
Not at all.
Yeah.
What they're critiquing is the packaging. When a study guide highlights only material gifts and, restricts the heavenly presence of God to an elite ruling class.
And uses manipulative media to bypass critical thought.
Exactly. You have to ask yourself, are you learning what the Bible actually says, or are you just learning what an organization needs you to believe?
That is the million-dollar question. So, bringing all this together, let's get a bottom-line summary. What are the key takeaways from this source's analysis of the Enjoy Life Forever brochure?
I'd say there are three main biblical insights to walk away with here.
Okay, hit me.
Number one, context is your only defense against manipulation. You cannot extract a historical promise made to ancient Israel during the Babylonian exile like Jeremiah 29 and apply it as a personal modern guarantee without doing serious violence to the text.
Right, you can't claim your neighbor's mail.
You absolutely cannot. Number two, the true biblical hope found in Revelation is not just a material utopia where we get to be healthy on earth while God stays far away in heaven.
The climax of the biblical hope is the absolute unmediated presence of the Creator dwelling with humanity.
Yes.
Yeah.
The focus of paradise is the giver, not just the physical gifts.
And number three.
Number three is that true faith requires the actual Beroean spirit. It means taking study materials, no matter how beautifully printed or emotionally moving they are, and rigorously testing them against the full context of the actual Bible.
If you're listening and you've spent years handing out this exact brochure, or maybe you are studying it right now, it can be genuinely terrifying to question it.
Absolutely.
The organization ties your hope of seeing dead loved ones and living in peace entirely to their specific interpretation. So if you start to question the brochure, it feels like you are losing paradise itself.
It feels like a massive risk.
But what this source argues is that by stripping away the organizational lens, you aren't losing hope. You are finding a hope that is far deeper, one that doesn't rely on an organization's approval.
That is such a crucial realization. The text can stand on its own without the glossy packaging.
Which leads me to a final thought for us to just chew on today. Building on this idea of where we actually place our hope, we talked a lot about the psychological tactics used to make you yearn for the specific physical paradise, right?
Mm-hmm.
But think about what happens to a person's psychological resilience over a lifetime when their ultimate hope is anchored to an ever-shifting, man-made timeline for an earthly utopia.
Oh, that's heavy.
When decades pass and the promised paradise hasn't arrived, the disappointment can be crushing. But if your ultimate hope is anchored in a timeless, spiritual relationship with the divine, regardless of the physical conditions of the world, how much more resilient, how much more unshakable does your peace become?
That's a great point. Because when the focus shifts from waiting for the perfect environment to cultivating the perfect relationship, the timeline doesn't even matter anymore.
Exactly. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We encourage you to open up your own Bibles, read the chapters before and after the verses you're given, and just keep asking those deep, uncomfortable, perfectly Beroean questions.